My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 69 years old, and for 15 years, I've financially supported my son and his family without them ever knowing it. Until my daughter-in-law screamed at me in front of the whole neighborhood, "You freeloading old man, living off my money." That very afternoon, I sold the house they were living in and left them with, quite literally, nothing. But the story I'm about to tell you is much more complex than you can imagine. Picture the scene. It was a Sunday morning. I was watering the plants in my yard when I heard shouting coming from the house next door. The house where my son, Robert, lived with his wife, Danielle, and my 2 grandchildren. Shouts carrying words I never thought I'd hear from my own daughter-in-law's mouth. "I can't take your father anymore," Danielle shrieked, her voice loud enough to be heard down the block. "That freeloading old man who lives off our money like he's some kind of parasite. I'm sick of him acting like he owns the place." I froze, the hose still in my hand. Freeloader, parasite. These words were coming from the mouth of the woman who, for 15 years, had eaten from my table, used my utilities, and lived in a house that I paid for month after month without her ever finding out. But before I tell you what happened next, I have to explain how I ended up in such a humiliating situation. Because this story began a long time ago, back when I still believed that helping in silence was the right thing to do, when I thought being a good father meant sacrificing everything without expecting any recognition. Listen closely to this story, and at the end, tell me what you would have done in my place. And also, let me know what city you're listening from, because this story could happen to any parent, anywhere in the world. It all started 20 years ago when Robert got his IT certification. I was so proud of my boy. I had worked as a mechanic my entire life to pay for his education. I'd get up at 5 in the morning and go to bed at 11 at night. But seeing my son with that certificate in his hand was worth every extra hour, every lost weekend. After graduating, Robert got a job at a tech firm. It didn't pay much, but it was a start. He started dating Danielle, a girl he'd met in college. She seemed like a good person at first, polite, nice to me, always greeting me with respect. "Mr. Miller," she'd say, "it's so good to see you. Robert tells me so much about you." She treated me well, included me in conversations when they came over. I thought I had found a wonderful daughter-in-law. When they decided to get married, Robert came to talk to me. "Dad," he said, "we want to have a beautiful wedding, but we don't have all the money. Could you help us out?" Of course I helped them. I took from my life savings to pay for the venue, the catering, even the wedding dress. It was my nest egg, but it was for my son's happiness. "Dad will pay you back as soon as we're on our feet," Robert promised. I told him not to worry, that it was my wedding gift, but deep down I hoped they would at least appreciate the sacrifice I was making. After the wedding, they rented a small apartment. Robert earned little, and Danielle worked part-time in an office. They lived paycheck to paycheck, but I thought that was normal, that all young couples go through that phase. Until one day, Robert called me, desperate. "Dad, we're behind on rent. The landlord is going to evict us. Could you lend us the money?" It wasn't a loan, it was a gift, because that money never came back. But I couldn't bear to see my son on the street. That was the first time. Many more followed. The car broke down, Danielle got sick, and they needed money for the doctor. They were both out of work for a few months. They wanted to move to a bigger apartment. There was always an emergency, always a reason they needed my help, and I always gave it. He was my only son. What was I going to do? Let him fend for himself? I had worked my whole life to give him a better future, and if he needed help now, I was going to give it. When my first grandchild was born, things got worse. Danielle quit her job to take care of the baby. Robert alone couldn't support the whole family. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. A decision they never knew I made. I went to the bank and took out a large mortgage, the kind that ties you down for life. With that money, I bought a house in their neighborhood, a 3-bedroom house with a yard, a garage, everything a young family could need. But I put it in my name. When I told them I'd found a house for them, they were ecstatic. "Dad, how did you find such a great house?" Robert asked. "It belongs to a friend who's moved out of state," I lied. "He's letting it go for a very cheap rent, practically giving it away." They moved into that house believing they were paying a symbolic rent to a supposed friend of mine. But the reality was I was paying the mortgage every month with my mechanic's pension and with side jobs I did on the weekends. Side jobs they never knew I had. While Robert relaxed on Sundays watching TV in his new living room, I was fixing cars in a makeshift workshop in my garage to make the mortgage payments. While Danielle invited friends over for coffee in her backyard, I was getting up at 6 a.m. to do odd jobs in plumbing or electrical work. But I did it happily. I saw my grandchildren running in that yard. I saw my son coming home from work to a house of his own. I saw my daughter-in-law tending to the garden as if she were the owner, and I felt satisfied. I thought all that sacrifice was worth it. What I didn't know was how Danielle had started talking about me when I wasn't around. I found out from my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who would overhear their conversations over the fence. "Arthur," she told me one day, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but your daughter-in-law speaks very badly of you when you're not there." I was floored. Badly of me? The woman who lived for free in a house I paid for was bad-mouthing me? "What does she say, Mrs. Peterson?" "She says you're meddlesome, that you get too involved in their lives, that Robert can't make a decision without consulting you. Yesterday, I heard her tell a friend on the phone that you're a nosy old man who won't let them live in peace." Meddlesome, nosy. I who was killing myself working to pay for their house. I who lay awake at night calculating how I would make ends meet with the mortgage payments and my own expenses. But I brushed it off as women's talk, thinking maybe Danielle was stressed with the kids and was just venting things she didn't really mean. I decided to ignore it and continue with my plan to give them a good life without them knowing the true cost. When my second granddaughter was born, things got even more complicated. More expenses, more needs, more requests for help. "Dad, we need a new crib." "Dad, diapers are so expensive." "Dad, the private pediatrician is pricey, but we don't like the one on our insurance plan." I kept giving. I kept working extra on weekends. I kept denying myself simple pleasures to cover all the expenses they generated. My own house started to fall apart because all my money went to supporting them. The paint was peeling, there were leaks in the roof, and the fridge barely worked. "Dad, why don't you fix up your house?" Robert would ask when he visited. "It looks really run down." I'd tell him I was in no hurry, that I'd get to it eventually. I couldn't tell him I had no money because I was giving it all to him. Danielle started to change towards me. She was no longer the polite, friendly daughter-in-law from before. When I visited, she'd greet me with a sour face. "Oh, Mr. Miller, what a surprise," she'd say. But it wasn't a pleasant surprise. It was more like, "Not this old man again," being a pain. If I arrived around lunchtime, she wouldn't invite me to stay. "Oh, Mr. Miller, we've already eaten. Maybe next time you could call before you come over." I, who paid for the very house she lived in, who had even paid for the refrigerator she got her food from, had to call before visiting. On Sundays, when families traditionally get together, they always started to have other plans. "Dad, we're having lunch with Danielle's parents." Always Danielle's parents. The other grandparents, who hadn't contributed a dime to help them, were the favorites. "Why don't you come over to my place once in a while?" I asked once. "Oh, Mr. Miller," Danielle said, "your house is just a bit complicated. The kids get so dirty, and then it's a hassle to clean their clothes." My house was complicated because all my time and money went into maintaining theirs. My house was deteriorating because I prioritized my family's well-being over my own. One day I overheard Danielle talking on the phone with her mother. I was in the yard fixing a leaky faucet, and they thought I had left. "No, Mom, Robert's old man is unbearable. He thinks he's the king of our lives. Yesterday, he came over without calling and just sat there all afternoon watching TV as if it were his house." As if it were his house. It was my house. Literally, legally, it was my house. But she spoke as if I were an intruder. "Besides," she continued, "he lives like he's broke, but he's always criticizing how we spend our money. The other day he saw me buying clothes for the kids and told me they were too expensive, as if he's the one paying for anything." I was the one paying. I paid for the house. I paid for a large part of their expenses. I deprived myself of things so they could live well. But to her, I was just a critical old man who didn't understand anything. The final straw came 3 months ago. Danielle organized a party at her house for my older granddaughter's birthday. She invited her whole family, her friends, the neighbors. A big party in the yard that I paid for, with food that was bought with money I had given them. When I arrived, she greeted me with a forced smile. "Oh, Mr. Miller, so glad you could make it. The kids were waiting for you, Sonia." But she seated me at a table in the corner, away from the action, as if I were a second-class guest. During the party, I heard Danielle telling her friends about her house, about her remodeling plans, about how they had managed to get such a steal on the rent. She spoke as if it were all her and Robert's achievement, as if they had just been lucky. "We're so fortunate," she told a friend. "We got this house for a bargain. The owner is an old friend of my father-in-law who practically gave it to us." A bargain, a gift. My daily sacrifice reduced to a stroke of luck. But the worst came later. When most of the guests had left, I heard Danielle talking with her sister-in-law in the kitchen. I was just gathering some dirty plates to help out when I overheard them. "Honestly," Danielle said, "sometimes I'm embarrassed when my father-in-law comes over. Look at how he's dressed. Look at his hands, all stained with grease." My friends' kids ask, "Who is that messy old man?" My hands were stained with grease because every weekend I worked on cars to pay for the house where she was throwing parties. I was poorly dressed because I bought myself a new shirt maybe once every 2 years so I could cover all their expenses. "And besides," she went on, "he thinks he has the right to an opinion on everything. The other day he told me the kids watch too much TV, as if he knows anything about raising modern children. He's from another era. He doesn't get it." That night I left the party with a broken heart. Not because of what she said about me, but because I realized I had dedicated my entire life to people who not only didn't value my sacrifice, but were actually ashamed of me. I came home to my rundown house, my half-empty fridge, my bed with worn-out sheets, and I sat down to think. What was I doing? Why was I killing myself working for people who despise me? That night, I made a decision they never imagined I could make, a decision that would change everything forever. The next day, I went to the bank and requested all the paperwork for the house. I wanted to see exactly how much I had paid over all these years, how much I had left to pay. The numbers shocked me. I had paid off almost 80% of the house, my house. Next, I went to see an appraiser. I wanted to know what the property was worth in the current market. The valuation surprised me. The house was worth much more than what I had originally paid. The area had become desirable, it had grown, it had become trendy. With that information, I went to see a lawyer, a no-nonsense guy recommended by a buddy from the workshop. I told him the whole situation, how I had bought the house without my family knowing, how I had been paying for it for years, how they thought it was a rental. The lawyer looked at me with a mixture of surprise and pity. "Mr. Miller," he said, "you are the legal owner of that house. You can do whatever you want with it. You can sell it, you can rent it to strangers, you can evict your family if you choose." "But counsel," I said, "it's my son and my grandkids. I can't just throw them out." "Mr. Miller," he replied, "sometimes family takes advantage of us precisely because they know we'll never take drastic measures. Sometimes you have to set boundaries." I left the lawyer's office with an idea swirling in my head, an idea that seemed terrible at first, but slowly began to take shape. What if I showed them whose house it really was? What if I stopped supporting them in secret? I spent 2 weeks mulling it over, watching them, listening to them, seeing how they continued to talk about me as if I were a burden, a nuisance, an old man who didn't understand the modern world. Robert never defended me when Danielle made her nasty comments. He would either stay silent or even agree with her. "Yeah, my dad is a bit old-fashioned," he'd say. "He doesn't get how things are now." Old-fashioned. The man paying for their house was old-fashioned. The man working weekends so they could live well was old-fashioned. I made the final decision that Sunday I told you about at the beginning, when I heard Danielle scream at Robert in the yard, "That freeloading old man who lives off our money like he's some kind of parasite." Freeloader. Parasite. Living off their money. In that moment, my patience ran out. In that moment, I realized I had been a fool for 15 years. I didn't go outside, I didn't argue, I didn't explain anything. I simply picked up my phone and called the lawyer. "Counsel," I said, "I want to sell the house. Today." "But Mr. Miller, are you sure? That's a very drastic decision." "I'm sure, counsel. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The lawyer already had everything prepared because we had discussed the possibility. There was a real estate agency that handled quick sales. There were interested buyers for that area. There was a whole machine ready to go. I can have the sale closed in 48 hours, he told me, but you'll have to notify your family that they need to vacate. I'll take care of that, I replied. That afternoon, while Danielle was still shouting next door about the old parasite, I signed all the sale documents. The house they lived in, the house they thought belonged to a friend of mine charging them a pittance for rent, was being sold to the highest bidder. On Monday morning, a process server Beard arrived at their house. I went with him. Robert opened the door, looking surprised. Dad, what's going on? Who is this man? I'm Mr. Martinez, the man introduced himself. I'm here to officially notify you that this property has been sold. The current occupants have 72 hours to vacate. Robert went pale. There must be some mistake. We rent this house. We have a lease. No, sir, said the server. This house belonged to Mr. Arthur Miller, and he sold it yesterday. There is no registered lease agreement on file. Danielle appeared from inside. What are you talking about? What is this? The server handed her the papers. Ma'am, you have 72 hours to vacate this property. The house was legally sold by its owner. Its owner? Danielle looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Mr. Miller, you're the owner of this house? Yes, Danielle, I've been the owner for 15 years. I bought it for you, I paid for it with my labor, and this whole time you believed it belonged to a friend of mine. Robert collapsed into a chair. Dad, I don't understand. You bought this house? Why did you never tell us? Because I wanted to help you without you feeling indebted to me. Because I thought if you knew I was paying for it, you'd feel uncomfortable. How wrong I was. Danielle was still reading the papers, her face a mask of disbelief. But Mr. Miller, you can't just sell the house on us like this. We live here. The kids go to school here. We can't just leave in 3 days. Danielle, I said, with a calm voice I didn't know I possessed. Yesterday I heard you scream at your husband that I was a freeloader, that I lived off your money, that I was a parasite. So I decided to show you whose money was really at stake. She was speechless. For the first time in years, Danielle was lost for words. Besides, I continued, the new owner specifically requested the house be vacant because she's moving in on Friday. The new owner, Robert, are you just the owner? Robert asked him. Yes, I sold the house to Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor. She heard everything Danielle said about me and offered to buy it for a very good price. Mrs. Peterson, who had been a silent witness to all the mistreatment I had received, had pooled her savings to buy the house. Arthur, she had told me, you don't deserve to be treated like this. I'll buy the house and we'll figure out the rest later. The following days were chaos. Robert called me every 5 minutes. Dad, we need to talk. This is insane. You can't do this. Danielle, for the first time in years, came to my house looking for me. She was no longer the arrogant daughter-in-law. Now she came to beg. Mr. Miller, she said, tears in her eyes, please forgive me for what I said. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. You know I respect you so much. Respect. The word I had been waiting to hear for years, arriving only when it was far too late. Danielle, I replied, for 15 years I worked like a slave so you could live well. For 15 years I deprived myself of things so that you would want for nothing. And for 15 years you treated me like I was a burden. But Mr. Miller, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know because you never bothered to know. You never asked yourselves how I managed to live on so little money. You never wondered why my house was falling apart while yours was pristine. Robert tried to mediate. Dad, I understand you're angry, but the kids are not to blame. They're your grandkids. You can't leave them on the street. I'm not leaving them on the street, Robert. I'm teaching you a lesson. A lesson you should have learned a long time ago. On Wednesday, as they desperately packed their things, looking for a place to move, I sat down and did the math. The math of everything I had spent on them over 15 years. Not just the house, but all the loans they never paid back, all the gifts, all the extra expenses. The sum surprised even me. I had spent the equivalent of 2 houses on them. 2 houses I could have had for myself. 2 houses that could have been my financial security for my old age. But I didn't regret doing it. I regretted doing it in secret. I regretted allowing them to disrespect me while I was supporting them. On Thursday night, Robert came to see me alone. He looked defeated, stripped of his usual arrogance. "Dad," he said, "we found an apartment to rent, but we need money for the security deposit. Can you help us one last time?" I looked at him in silence for a long time. My son, my only son, the man for whom I had sacrificed my whole life, was asking me for money again. After everything that had happened, after discovering the truth, his first reaction was to ask for more help. "Robert," I said, "for 15 years, I helped you without you knowing it. I gave you a house, I paid your bills, I worked extra on weekends so you could live comfortably. And do you know what I got in return, son? I got contempt. I got mockery. I got a daughter-in-law who called me a parasite while living off my work. And I got a son who never once stood up for me." He remained silent. For the first time in his life, Robert had no answer. "You're going to get the money for that security deposit yourself by working like normal people do, like you should have been doing from the very beginning." "But Dad, I do work." "You work to get by, Robert. Now you're going to have to work to truly live, without Dad paying for your house behind the scenes." On Friday, they left. I watched from my window as they loaded their things into a moving truck they had to pay for themselves. Danielle was crying. My grandkids were asking why they had to leave. Robert carried the boxes with the look of a man at a funeral. Mrs. Peterson invited me for a coffee in the yard of the house that was now hers. "Arthur," she said, "don't you feel sad seeing them like this?" "Carmen," I replied, "I feel sad that it took me so long to make this decision." With the money from the sale of the house, I was able to do something I hadn't done in decades. Think about myself. I fixed my house from top to bottom, replaced all the appliances, bought myself new clothes, and treated myself to things I hadn't enjoyed in years. I also did something more important. I made an investment that ensures an income for the rest of my life. I no longer have to work on weekends. I no longer have to count every penny. I no longer have to live like a poor man to support others. But above all, I regained my dignity. The dignity I had slowly lost without even realizing it, while I allowed them to treat me like a nuisance. 3 months after they moved, Robert called me. "Dad," he said, "we're settled in the new apartment. Do you want to come see it?" I went, more out of curiosity than anything else. The apartment was small, dark, with little space for the kids. Robert had lost weight. He looked stressed. Danielle avoided my gaze and greeted me with a forced politeness. "How are you doing financially, Obasi?" I asked. "It's tight," Robert answered. "The rent is expensive, but we're managing." Danielle had gone back to work part-time. Danielle, working again. The woman who had gotten used to living like a queen without a pulp now had to get up early every day. "The kids miss the old house," Robert told me. "They ask when we're going back." "You're not going back," I said. "That chapter is over." During that visit, I noticed something that caught my attention. Robert and Danielle spoke to each other differently. It wasn't the relaxed marriage from before. There was tension, silent reproaches, resentment. "How are things between you two?" I asked Robert when Danielle went to the kitchen. "Complicated," he confessed. "She blames me for losing the house. She says if I had had a better relationship with you, you wouldn't have made that decision." Interesting. Now the blame was on Robert for not having a good relationship with me. It wasn't her fault for treating me badly for years. It was his fault for not managing me better. "And what do you think?" I asked him. Robert sighed. "I think we were ungrateful. I think you gave us everything and we didn't know how to value it. I think we deserved what happened to us." It was the first time Robert admitted they had been wrong. The first time he acknowledged my sacrifice. But it came too late, when it no longer mattered. 6 months later, Robert and Danielle separated. He told me over the phone, his voice weary. "It's over, Dad. Danielle is moving in with her parents and taking the kids." "And what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Look for something cheaper, maybe a studio apartment. With what I make, I can't afford to support the kids and pay for a decent apartment." A studio. My son, who had lived for 15 years in a 3-bedroom house paid for by me, was now going to end up in a studio. "Robert," I said, "all this time I supported you without you knowing. I paid for the house, I paid your bills, I worked weekends so you could live a peaceful life. And when I found out what you really thought of me, I made the right decision. I know, Dad. I realize now everything you did. You realize it now when you have no other choice but to realize it. Dad, is there any chance that what, Robert? That you could help me again, just until I get back on my feet? I looked at him in silence. After losing the house, after his marriage fell apart, after ending up practically on the street, his reaction was still the same. Ask me for help. Robert, for 15 years I helped you in secret and you despised me. Now that you know the truth, you come asking for help again. It's different now, Dad. Now I know what you did for us. No, son, it's not different. You're coming to me for help because you have no other option, not because you've learned to value me. If you won the lottery tomorrow, you go right back to treating me like you did before. Robert fell silent because he knew it was true. A year after selling the house, my life had completely changed. I was no longer the old man working weekends to secretly support an ungrateful family. I was a 70-year-old man who, for the first time in decades, was living for himself. I joined a senior center where I played poker every afternoon. I met Mr. Henderson, a 75-year-old widower who had gone through something similar with his kids. Arthur, he'd tell me, family has to earn respect, not demand it just because they're family. I also met Hope, a 65-year-old woman whose husband had passed away 5 years ago. She volunteered at a hospital and had an infectious energy. We started going for walks in the afternoons, then for coffee, then for dinner. Don't you miss your family? She asked me once. I miss the family I thought I had, I answered. But I don't miss the people who looked down on me while living off my hard work. Hope had 2 children who lived out of state and visited her often. When they met me, they welcomed me with genuine affection. Mr. Miller, her oldest son, said, "My mom has been so much happier since she met you. Thank you for making her smile." How different it felt to be welcomed instead of tolerated. How different it was to be with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. Hope and I started dating 8 months after we met. At 70 years old, I discovered you could fall in love again. I discovered you could be happy without carrying the weight of supporting ungrateful people. Meanwhile, Robert continued to spiral. He lost his job for showing up late after nights of binge drinking to drown his problems. He had to move into a cheap boarding house because he couldn't even afford the studio apartment. Mrs. Peterson, who stayed in touch, told me, "Arthur," she said, "your son is doing very badly. He's asking for any kind of work, but no one will give him a chance. He's desperate." "Carmen," I'd reply, "I was desperate for years, working like an animal to support them. Now it's his turn." Danielle, for her part, had moved back in with her parents. The same parents who for years had enjoyed having lunch in a house paid for by me while I ate alone in my deteriorating home. Now she had to endure them telling her how to raise her children all day long. "Danielle's parents are driving her crazy," Mrs. Peterson told me. "They criticize everything. They don't let her live in peace. She says she misses her house." Her house. The house I had paid for 15 years was still her house in her mind. 2 years after selling the house, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Danielle, "Mr. Miller," she said in a voice I didn't recognize. "Can we talk?" "Talk about what, Danielle?" "About what happened, about what I did, about how badly I treated you." I agreed to see her, more out of curiosity than anything else. She came to my house on a Thursday afternoon. She looked very different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, with that look of someone who has been through hard times. "Mr. Miller," she said as soon as she sat down, "I've come to ask for your forgiveness. I've come to tell you that you were right about everything." "What was I right about, Danielle?" "That we were ungrateful, that we didn't know how to appreciate what you did for us." She burst into tears, a deep sob that seemed to come from her very soul. "Mr. Miller, I didn't know you were paying for the house. I thought Robert was earning all the money from his job. If you had known, what would you have done differently? Danielle, would you have treated me better?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I would have treated you like you deserved, like the man who was supporting us. So you would have respected me for the money I provided, not for being your husband's father." She fell silent. That was it exactly. Her respect would have been bought, not earned. "Danielle," I said, For years, you treated me like a nuisance, an old man who didn't understand the modern world. And now that you know I paid for everything, you come asking for forgiveness. I just don't understand how you could keep that a secret for so long. I kept it a secret because I wanted to help you without you feeling obligated. I thought it was generosity. Later, I realized it was stupidity. Danielle kept crying. Mr. Miller, the kids ask about their grandpa. They want to come see you. They miss the afternoons they spent here. My grandkids, the only innocent ones in this whole story. And what do you tell them? I tell them that Grandpa is mad at Mom and Dad, but that he loves them very much. Does Robert know you came? No, Robert is doing very badly, Mr. Miller. He's in a rough patch. He drinks a lot, can't hold down a steady job. Sometimes he doesn't see the kids for weeks. My son, the IT professional for whom I had worked double shifts, was now a drunk who couldn't keep a job. And what do you expect me to do? I asked her. I don't know, maybe if you talk to him, if you help him get back on his feet, help him again, give him another chance to treat me badly. No, Mr. Miller, Robert has changed. He's remorseful. Danielle, Robert is desperate. That's different. When someone is desperate, they'll say anything, promise anything. But when things get better, they go back to being the same person they always were. She left that afternoon without getting what she came for. But before she left, she said something that stuck with me. Mr. Miller, you were like a father to me too. I grew up without a dad, and when I met Robert, I thought I had gained not just a husband, but a father too. A father. For all those years I was killing myself working to support her. She saw me as a father. But she treated me like a nuisance. Is that how she treated fathers? 3 months later, Robert showed up at my house. He was in a pitiful state, thin, wearing dirty clothes, smelling of alcohol, with several days' worth of beard. My son, my only son, looked like a homeless man. Dad, he said, I've hit rock bottom. I've lost everything. I have nowhere to live, nothing. I need help. What kind of help? Anything. A place to stay for a few days while I find a job, a little money for food, whatever. I looked at him for a long time. He was my blood, my flesh, the baby I had held in my arms, the boy who used to help me in the workshop, the young man I had been so proud of when he got his certification. Robert, I said, I will help you, but with conditions. His face lit up. Anything, Dad. Anything. First condition, you check into a rehab center to quit drinking. Second condition, when you get out, you find a job, any job, and you don't ask me for money for 6 months. Third condition, you treat me with the respect I deserve, not like an ape you can withdraw from when you're in a pinch. I accept it all, Dad, everything you say. And a fourth condition, if you ever disrespect me with again, just once, if you go back to treating me like you did before, it's over for good. There are no more second chances. Robert checked into a rehab center, which I paid for. 3 months of intensive treatment. When he got out, he was changed, thinner, but stronger, more serious, with a different look in his eyes. He got a job at a mechanic's shop. It wasn't IT systems, it was manual labor, but he accepted it without complaint. He started visiting me every Sunday, punctual, respectful, grateful. Dad, he told me one of those afternoons, these past few months have helped me understand a lot of things, to understand what you did for us and how badly we treated you. And what exactly did you understand? That for years we were like parasites feeding off your work, that we lived well thanks to your sacrifice, and on top of that, we disrespected you, that we were the worst children anyone could have. It was the first time Robert used the word parasite to refer to himself, the same word Danielle had used to refer to me. Robert, I said, what hurt the most wasn't the money I spent on you. What hurt the most was the lack of respect. I would have worked myself to death for you, but I needed you to value me. Can you forgive me, Dad? I already have, son. That's why I'm helping you again. But you have to understand that the relationship has changed. I'm no longer the father who gives without asking. Now I'm the father who gives when he sees it's deserved. A year later, Robert had managed to stabilize his life. He had a steady job. He had rented a small but decent apartment. He saw his kids every other weekend. He still came to my house every Sunday. But now the relationship was different. He was no longer the son who came to ask. He was the son who came to share. He'd bring donuts for our coffee, tell me about his work. He'd ask about my health, about my relationship with Hope. "Are you going to marry Hope?" he asked one Sunday. "We're thinking about it," I replied. "Does that bother you?" "No, Dad, not at all. I'm glad you're happy. You deserve it after everything you've been through." After everything I'd been through, Robert had learned to see things from my perspective, something he had never done in his first 40 years of life. Hope and I got married at the courthouse on a Tuesday morning. A simple ceremony, with just her children as witnesses. Robert wanted to come, but I told him it was something private. "I understand, Dad," he said. "Maybe by the next family event, I'll have earned my place." Earned his place. What a concept. Robert had understood that family love isn't unconditional, that respect must be earned day by day, that being a son doesn't give you the right to mistreat your parents. Daniela tried to get closer several times, but I kept my distance. She had been the primary architect of my humiliation for years. I could forgive her, but I couldn't forget. "The kids want to meet their new grandmother," Robert told me, referring to Hope. "If you want, we can arrange something." I agreed to let my grandkids meet Hope. After all, they weren't to blame for their parents' mistakes. The first time they came over, they were shy around her, but she had a special way with children. In half an hour, they were playing and laughing as if they'd known her their whole lives. Grandpa, my older granddaughter, who is now 12, said to me the other day, "Mom says you got mad at them because they didn't respect you. Is that true?" "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think that if I worked really hard to give someone something nice, and that person was mean to me, I'd be mad too." Kids understand more than we think. They understand fairness. They understand when something isn't right. They understand that grandparents have feelings too. Daniela tried to approach me a few more times, but I maintained my distance. Not out of resentment, but for self-preservation. Daniela had been the engine of all the contempt I received for years. She had poisoned Robert against me. She had created the toxic environment that forced me to take drastic measures. "Mr. Miller," she said the last time she came, "I know I'll never earn your forgiveness, but I want you to know that every single day I regret being so awful to you." "Daniela Moss," I replied, "I have already forgiven you. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean exposing myself to mistreatment again. You can go on with your life in peace. I'm going to go on with mine." She left in tears, but I didn't feel pity. I felt peace. The peace of having set things right, of having defended my dignity, of having shown that neither age nor family ties are an excuse to accept abuse. Mr. Henderson, my friend from the senior center, told me something very wise. "Arthur, some people learn from their mistakes, and other people learn from the consequences. Your son learned from the consequences, which is more painful but also more effective." He was right. Robert didn't change when he realized he was wrong. He changed when he lost everything. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to understand the value of what you had. Today, as I recount this story in my fun to tell it to you, I look out the window and see Hope watering the plants in the garden. I see my fixed-up house, the new furniture, the full refrigerator. I see the quiet life I managed to build after years of sacrificing for people who didn't value it. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor. I don't have a large family, but I have a family that respects me. I don't live in a mansion, but I live in a home filled with true love. And above all, I have something I didn't have 3 years ago: peace of mind. The peace that comes from knowing you made the right decisions, even if they were difficult. The peace that comes from knowing you are no longer anyone's victim. My story isn't perfect. I lost years of a relationship with my grandchildren. I lost the illusion of the united family I always dreamed of. I lost the money that could have been an inheritance for Robert. But I gained more important things. I gained self-respect. I gained a partner who values me. I gained the tranquility of living without having to beg for affection. If I had to make the same decision again, I would do it without hesitation. I would sell the house again. I would leave that toxic situation again. I would start over again. because I learned that it's never too late to say enough. It's never too late to defend your dignity, and it's never too late to be happy, even if you have to start from scratch. The last thought I want to share with you is this. For years, I thought being a good father meant putting up with anything to keep the family together. I later understood that being a good father also means teaching your children that there are consequences for mistreatment. Robert learned late, but he learned. My grandchildren learned that grandparents are not toys to be used when it's convenient. Daniela learned that actions have consequences, even if they arrive years later. And I learned the most important lesson of all, that self-love isn't selfishness, it's emotional survival. Tell me, what would you do in my place? And from what city are you listening? Because this story can happen to anyone, anywhere. And the important thing is to know that there is always a way out, always a chance to reclaim your dignity. Remember, it is never too late to start respecting yourself. And when you start respecting yourself, others have no choice but to respect you too, or disappear from your life. And believe me, either of those options is better than living as the emotional punching bag for your own family. If this story resonated with you and you wish to hear more real-life experiences, please consider subscribing to our channel, Whispers of Experience. Your support helps us continue to share these vital narratives. Thank you for listening.